Welcome to the Grief Ladies, the practical guide to what comes next. I'm Kelly Daugherty.
And I'm Karyn Arnold, and we are two grief professionals with over 50 years of combined experience. We're here to validate, educate, and give you tangible tools you can actually use.
Each episode motivates you to take action and reminds you it's okay to want to feel better. This is the Grief Ladies, a guide to what comes next.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I'm Karyn here with my co-host, Kelly Daugherty, and today we are welcoming Larisa Makuch. So, Larisa, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, it's that's wonderful. So, we always have that chance to talk a little bit ahead of time. I'm very excited about everything that Larisa has to share. So, as we work through our grief framework, we are at the letter R, which stands for rebuilding. And what we're trying to focus on a little bit is the importance of structure, routine, motivation, things like that. Larisa, even just I was like looking at your bio, I'm like, oh, this is going to be so good. And I was saying to Kelly, like, I kind of forgot how I would be so excited to be, hearing from our guests and all the things that you have to share. So, Larisa, I'm just going to share your bio with everybody to start, just so they have a better idea of your background and what you're bringing to us today. So, Larisa is a master results coach, CEO, and founder of Abundance Academy, which I love the name of that, by the way, and joining us to discuss rebuilding and our grief in action, as we mentioned. And we're going to dive into, some practical strategies, things that are going to help rebuilding routine after a loss. So, Larisa is a transformational coach, speaker, and author of Stop Procrastinating Your Life Away. As CEO of Abundance Academy, she helps ambitious, heart-centered women overcome subconscious blocks and create success on their own terms. Drawing from her expertise in NLP, hypnotherapy, and mindset mastery, Larisa blends science with soul to foster clarity, confidence, and sustainable growth without burnout. So again, so much good stuff there. Love the science with soul. I thought that was pretty great too. So we have lots of questions. Kelly, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So, Larisa, would you, I'm curious, based on your bio, would you maybe want to share with our listeners a little bit about what subconscious blocks mean?
So, without getting into a big neuroscience lesson, we're going to say the many parts of our mind, if we divide them in two, we've got the conscious thinking mind and we've got this unconscious aspect that lives below the surface. The conscious thinking is what you learn in school, the decisions that you make, the logical thinking mind. And then the unconscious mind is everything else below that, the things that's responsible for automatic functions, for your belief system, for how you for who you perceive you are in the world, for the decisions that you make without having to give them thought, the things that just fall out of your mouth. And so there's a lot of things going on below the surface. And so often when we start doing things and we're like, well, I know I should be doing this, but why am I not doing it? I know what to do. It's just not happening. And you're in this conflict essentially where logically you might know the steps, but you just can't get to it. And you feel like, am I messed up? Is something wrong with me? A lot of that's an indication that there is something going on below the surface. And that often shows up as repetitive problems, like lifelong challenges or things that keep coming up in different forms, like one toxic relationship after another, maybe hitting the glass ceiling, especially in this case, like challenges with family dynamics. I think a lot of times there will be, are you butting head with this person in this family, this person in this part of the family? And why is no one else having this problem, but why are you? So there's something going on below the surface. And if you don't deal with it, it's just going to keep following you. It's kind of like, who's that guy on Charlie Brown with the little cloud around him?
Oh, yeah.
It's following you and lingering, right? And
Yeah.
you don't want it to. You might take a shower, but it still keeps following you. So.
Yep. Yeah. Well, so those subconscious blocks, I think, grief really can complicate them and get in the way some more. And so what are some ways that maybe you could help a grieving individual kind of maybe work through some of those or get to the root, right?
Yeah. I don't know if it's just like okay, I've got like an easy step process. I think a big part of it is really honoring and recognizing where you're at. Like grief is a natural part of life. It's something that if someone, if you genuinely love someone and they're meaningful to you, you've had great experiences with them, you're going to grieve them versus someone else that you didn't know or you don't care about. They pass away. You're like, well, that's sad. And you don't give it 5 more minutes of thought. And the reason we grieve is because we care about people and because we had these moments and we're in this state where we're thinking about like, oh my God, we might never have this again. And we get ourselves in these loops and in these cycles. And I think one of the simplest, there's so many different tools. One of the simplest things we can do is simply start honoring the good things about the people that we've lost. Like when my grandmother passed away, she passed away, and it took me almost 20 years to stop crying my face off. And like and every time I think of her, I'd be like just drenched in tears. I had like rituals I'd follow every year to honor her, and if I didn't follow them, I was a horrible person and would judge myself for it. Right. And then versus when my father passed away, like it was a tough year. Like I'm not going to lie, but by that point, I had tools and resources in my life, and it was a dramatically different experience. And so, um, I think when you continually, and this isn't something you just do with grief, it's something you do in general. If you're continually feeding your mind and starting to think in a certain way, you're not going to need to stay stuck. You're going to start looking for solutions. And you can stay stuck or you can get into solution mode. And that doesn't mean let me ignore all my feelings. Let me avoid those. Let me move through this grief process as fast as possible. Like maybe it'll take longer, maybe it'll take less. There's no like definitive timeline. However, I think you're going to have the level of awareness that you do have choice, that things can evolve, that things will move on. And so often when you're just in the thick of it, you don't have that awareness. And so I think part of the um, ability to access the subconscious tools is having the conscious awareness that there are tools.
Yes, absolutely. That's awesome. So, what do you think were some of the tools that really helped you be able to navigate your father's death so much differently than your grandmother's?
Yeah. There is a quote by Reverend Michael Beckwith that I was taught by Bob Proctor. And he says, when something bad happens, it is what it is. Accept it. And I was actually the one that found my father, and driving to his house, I knew, like in my heart, I knew what I was probably walking into. Husband went in first and he's like, okay, this is it. And I was like, I want to be there. And he didn't want to let me, but I'm like, no, for me, I need to. And so I was like, okay, it is what it is. I accept it. And he passed away when he was 62. So he wasn't old. It was kind of surprising and kind of not. But I had accepted it. I'm like, okay, I know not the ideal scenario, but I can see where this came from. Fine. Harvest the good, step two. And sometimes this can be really tricky because we're so focused and used to noticing what's wrong and what's bad and what we're going to lose and what's missing, instead of looking for the opportunities or the blessings or even harvesting the beautiful memories of the person. And then the third is forgive all the rest. And I realized I was in a motivational stage at that point. I just started being a consultant for the Proctor Gallagher Institute, and we're thinking and studying all this positive stuff. And I realized I'm like, you know, I have to put my big juicy goals and all my like business rah aside for a while. And that day I went on a training call and I was just like, okay, you know what? I can't study this stuff right now. But what I can do is I know I need to study something because I know what you feed your mind is what's going to get expressed. So I literally started studying the law of forgiveness. I didn't have a terrible relationship with my father, but there were things like I'm like, you know what? I I could have been a better person towards him. And I was like, I don't want to feel like I'm regretting things. I don't want to feel like I was a terrible daughter. And I knew based on my history, it would have been easy to slip into that. And I'm like, I really want to step into that self-forgiveness. So I studied the law of forgiveness. That was something I needed specifically, but I think feeding your mind is absolutely critical, and feeding your mind good things, whether it's um forgiveness or acceptance, or maybe reconnecting to your spiritual source, whether it's reading the Bible, whether it's connecting to some other spiritual text. I think those kinds of themes are more appropriate, not necessarily like, let's go crush it and let's go earn 10x billion dollars. Like, that's great, but you might need to scale back a little bit. So if you're used to being a high achiever, if you're used to being systematic, maybe you'll have to let go of some of the organization and let things be a little more imperfect. So it's okay to let things change a bit, at least for a period of time. But I'd say, like, study something. So first, like, accept it. Second, find the good, or find the blessings. And then third, you've got to feed your mind, because if you're not feeding your mind, like for me, I literally studied forgiveness because I knew that was so important. I kept repeating that quote in my mind, and I didn't want to have a bad experience. And it turned into a beautiful experience over the course of that year. Not even just for myself, but for other people involved as well.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a couple of words that stuck out to me, but was the idea of I want and what I don't want. And I think the idea of choice through this is really important, and the things that we decide along the way. I know for a lot of grieving people, it sometimes feels like life is just pulling you along. You didn't get any choices or decision in how any of this happened, or the life situation that you're finding yourself in. And I think it can make people feel helpless and kind of powerless. And so I imagine through all of our work, that's what we're trying to do, is sort of empower people and let them know that they do have some choices, and there are some things along the way that we can sort of decide to do and do for ourselves, to be able to survive the things that feel so difficult and the things that we felt like we had no choice in. So when you were talking before about those blocks, and I hear people say all the time, like, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm not doing it. I will tell you, again, separate sometimes from grief, I found this in grief, but even just with eating and, exercise, there's different habits that we sort of, there's no secrets left, really. We all kind of know, I think, what we're supposed to be doing. And yet so many people are not doing it or struggling to do it. And again, as Kelly said earlier, it makes it hard. When you're grieving, I think sometimes to find the motivation or the interest. I think that people really underestimate the role of routine and structure in how it can help them in moving forward. And I love your idea of like a daily reset, things like that that can help people. So, where do you think that can fit in when people are trying to rebuild in their
Mhm.
life?
I think everyone absolutely needs daily success habits. And whether we call it daily success habits or, like you said, a daily reset, there need to be a fundamental set of tools that you commit to and you stick to no matter what, whether you want to or not. And again, if you are undergoing this type of like emotional turmoil, what you put into those spots might change. Where when you're at the peak of your game, it might be more strategic, it might be more energetic, it might be more alive. But when you're in this, it might be something like, make sure to shower every day. Like, I know when I had my son, I was just like, a shower was a big accomplishment, but something as simple as a shower shows you that you're taking care of yourself. And sometimes when you're like, especially if you lose a spouse or someone that's really close to you, you're like, what's the point of going on? Well, you have to show yourself that you matter, and that's like a very basic point. Over time, it essentially something to feed your mind, to feed your body, and to and to really soothe your soul, like connect to something or someone bigger. And the more we keep doing that, sleep is also really critical. I think it's underestimated, and it can get very difficult to have that sleep routine. But if you don't start being really intentional with some of the basics, like, what are you eating? How are you moving? Are you making your bed and showering? Like, these are some of the basic fundamental things. But if you're not knocking those things out of the park and not at least doing them, that might be your routine at one phase of the game. if you're good in that department, you can start elevating. And maybe, I think another thing a lot of people underestimate is the power of people and the power of human connection. When you're grieving, you don't always want to talk to people, but there are times where you just have to force yourself to be around people. You can only shut down and hide for so long. And there may be a short period where you just need to be in quiet, but sooner than later, you need to have human connection. That's what we are designed to do. We're designed to be around others, and that's not going to serve you long term. For a short period, maybe you need that, but part of those daily success habits sooner than later is talk to humans. Go for lunch with people. Say hi to your neighbor. Go for a walk. Like, just be around people. And when you can start creating meaningful connections with them, like maybe doing an activity with them, that's going to help you reconnect to the joy of life.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's really important and making it part of the daily routine. Grief has this way of making us feel very lonely and isolated. And, we do need a little time to kind of withdraw to be processing. But as I always say, too much time in your own head is not a good thing. And so we sometimes need to, invite other people in so that we can just kind of, get their perspectives. And, it gets complicated though, I think sometimes with other people. But I agree with you that I think people fare better. Back when I worked for hospice, I was a bereavement coordinator and I'd reach out to people in the aftermath, maybe 4 to 6 weeks after. And oftentimes I hear a lot of the same things. And then I'd say, well, how are you doing? How's it been going? I said, I'm doing okay. I'm keeping busy. And it was so interesting how people phrased those two things together and how, it helped me realize, and usually they weren't just busy on their own, busy doing other things and spending some time for people who were, nourishing them. And I think helping them is really important.
Before we jump back into the episode, we want to share something that's really close to both of us: The Grief Experience: Tools for Acceptance, Resilience, and Connection is not only a powerful book, it's actually how we met.
We were two of the 25 authors who came together to write this collection. Each chapter offers a personal story about grief, different relationships, different circumstances, different ways people try to make sense of life after someone they love died. Readers tell us these stories feel honest, compelling, and surprisingly reassuring. Many say it helped them feel less alone in what they're carrying.
What makes this book unique is that it doesn't stop at the story. Each chapter ends with a practical tool, something the reader can use right away. One reviewer said the suggestions at the end of the chapter became a lifeline when they weren't sure what to do next. If you're looking for grounded support, or you're a therapist wanting to understand better the reality of grief from many angles, this book offers connection, clarity, and real guidance, not cliches.
You can find The Grief Experience on Amazon, and we'd love to get your feedback.
So I'm curious because you talk a lot about procrastination. So what I think happens with like grief, right? Especially very early grief, especially widows. I think you see this, and obviously children as well, when their parents die, if they're the executor or whatever. There's a lot of procrastination about the things that have to be done. So, it can feel really overwhelming. I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and she's like, I'm just trying to do one thing a day on that checklist of what I need to do, right? Getting the car, transferred into my name, closing this account, doing all of these things. But when we're so physically exhausted from grieving, it's really hard to do those things and we procrastinate. So, do you have any good tips for somebody that is maybe really struggling with that list? Because there's a lot to do,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
It's not magic. Like, I love your do one thing a day. I think that's great. But sometimes if that one thing has many steps and it's too big of a thing, break it down. Reduce it
Mm.
to the ridiculous. We literally had one of our clients on our accountability call, and she was like, I didn't get my stuff done. And she felt terrible. And she's like, I'm an achiever and I didn't get it. And I missed this really important thing. But her thing was so big. I'm like, it was impossible for you to get it done because you put such a big thing in, you didn't even start. And so I told her, I'm like, well, what if you break it down to the most basic element and put that on your list? And she's like, I could totally do that. She's like, I'll probably finish the whole thing anyway by the next month. But she put the most basic thing down as her absolute must commitment. And and it's okay if it's a smaller piece, but there isn't an easy answer. You're going to just have to do it. You just have to get into action mode. And sometimes if you are having a better day, like make your minimum one thing a day. However, if you're having a better day, maybe you're like, okay, I'm going to burn through 5 or 7 or 10 of these things, and leverage it when you can. Like when you do have those bursts of energy, get what you can out of it, because it's going to help you move further faster. And the only thing you can do is the next thing you can do. I remember the first time I was teaching a 3-day training. It was my very first time, like over a decade ago. I was intimidated because I had to teach new curriculum. I had to prepare. I wanted to make sure I was ready for the students. Like I knew what I was doing, but I'd never taught this particular training before. And so the one of the previous instructors, she said, Larissa, you know the material. Read through the material once so you have an idea. But don't memorize. Like don't go into depth. Read through it and only prepare for the next day. So for your Friday, prepare that on Thursday. For your Saturday, prepare that Friday night. For your Sunday, prepare that Saturday night. And you know what? I did that. And I thought it would take me all night to prep. It literally took me like an hour or two to prepare for the next day. And so what it taught me is this thing I thought was so big and scary really didn't take that much time. And chances are, if you just commit to that one little task, know the task you're doing the next day. Why? Because if you know the task you're doing the next day, your mind can process it and help you find solutions. Your unconscious mind can work for you throughout the night. So it's just easier to execute. If you look at the list in the morning, you're going to go, oh crap. And then you're going to like, well, should I do this one or should I do this one? Should I do this? Make the decision for the next day's task the day before. Like simple thing, but that's a way to get your unconscious working for you, because you're like, oh, this is the task I will do tomorrow. I will do it at this time. Even if it doesn't work out perfectly, make the commitment, set the time, and you will be much more likely to commit it, complete it, even if it's at a different time. Why? Because you've mentally said, okay, I'm putting that little program in, I'm putting into my mental calendar, and your mind will say, okay. So your conscious mind is a goal setter, right? So consciously you set it. Your unconscious mind is a goal getter. Your unconscious mind does what you tell it to. It loves to be bossed around and it follows direction. And so give it direction the night before. It'll be like doing its programming overnight while you're sleeping, and then you wake up and you're ready to go. But there's no second
That's
guessing.
that's awesome. I love that. And I also think, once you do it, then reward yourself. Celebrate that, right? That
Oh,
you did that.
yeah. It's always nice to do that. And the thing is though, some people, they're going to love the celebration, and others they don't like it. Like we work with a lot of high achieving women, and they're like, yeah, I should celebrate, but why would I bother doing that? And I think when you're in the grief cycle, like it might be difficult to actually, like for some people, they're very motivated by celebration, and others they're not necessarily. They're more motivated by pain, and human nature is to be motivated by pain rather than pleasure. So I'm going to say, if you're good with celebration, great, reward yourself. If you're not, the reward is getting the thing off the list. You don't necessarily need to put a consequence to it because you're already going through enough stuff. However, um, just to keep it as simple as possible, I think is the most important thing. Like, so a 5-year-old could do it. Like if I could teach my son to be able to put something on a list and do it the next day, anyone could do it.
Well, it sounds like the idea behind it is also to help people stay more present focused. I know a lot of times with people I work with, I always say they're kind of taking the time machine where they're going to the back and thinking about the things they're second guessing, regretting, spending a lot of mental time and energy there. But there's also a lot of that worry about what comes next. Who's going to take care of me? Where am I going to be 5 years from now? And that's just a lot of energy used on things that we have no control over. So I'm always trying to encourage people to bring themselves back, today, tomorrow, the next few days, but that's about as much control as I feel like we have. And I think what you're saying is like a really good framework for that, with that kind of night before the next day, because people are used to planning, but I think it becomes harder to because they don't also oftentimes maybe don't have that person that they planned with or that they scheduled around. If they were a caregiver, they've seen huge changes in their routine. So there's just so many adjustments that people are trying to make. I think through some of this that like the repetition is very important, that the consistency and recognizing that it's not usually an overnight thing. It's like any habits that we're trying to shift that we need to make a little space and time for it. But it's kind of sounds like that gives a lot of opportunity to do that with what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned repetition because it's almost like you need the repetition to get it into your body on a cellular level. So let's say if you were going to create a groove, if you were going to carve something out of wood and you create a groove, the first groove is going to be really light. But then you do it again and it gets a little deeper. It gets a little deeper. It gets a little deeper. And all of a sudden the groove is really deep. It's really solid. And you don't need to wonder which direction you're going to go. It's already set and all you have to do is just keep following the pattern. And that's what we need to do through repetition. We literally it's like you have to train your muscles to get stronger
Mhm.
by repetition. It's the same thing we do with our habits, with our conditioning, with our forward momentum. It's just going to be a bit different than other circumstances. I think this is where you don't give up on yourself. You don't give yourself excuses. You still have to at some points and in certain circumstances, like you just got to do it. However, you can still honor yourself. You can still realize, I think one big thing is sometimes we do forget, like the emotions we have are valid. They
Mm.
really are. You don't want to ignore the emotions, but you don't want to be swallowed up in them. And one of the things that we often teach is you can feel any emotion for like 45 to 90 seconds. And you can like fully feel it. You can feel pissed, you can feel depressed, you can feel frustrated, you could feel sad, you could feel angry. Great. But then if you're feeling it for much longer than that, you're looping a story in your head.
Mm.
And when you realize that, you're like, oh yeah, because I used to be very proficient at keeping myself in crappy emotional states. But what was I doing? I was playing the story. I would journal about the terrible story. I would cry. I would talk to 10 people about the awful story. And what happened? I felt really, really bad a lot of the time. And then I realized nobody really cares. Okay. So that was an attention seeking mechanism way long ago, like a few decades ago. Didn't work. But then when I realized, I'm like, okay, as I started doing this work, I'm like, you know what? I am totally justified in feeling this emotion. Um, but okay, where am I going next? Maybe you can't go from sad to exuberant, but you can go from sad to content to a little bit intrigued, maybe not curious, but like intrigued to pleasantly surprised to satisfied. Like you can go on that emotional journey. And that's like a very natural progression for someone. And I think realizing that you don't have to go from here, like 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds, but over the course of an hour or two, you don't have to stay where you are. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to stay there because we're in like, oh, this just happened recently. Well, you don't have to stay there. You can maneuver around different emotions and you can really honor yourself as a human and still feel everything at the appropriate time.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Love that so much. And,
Mhm.
it is, I love that you talked about, I always talk about the 90-second rule, right? We get so caught up because of our thoughts. So thank you for bringing that back up. And so, uh, even though I think I know probably where your answer is going to go because you've kind of already addressed the next part of this is one of the things that I find very important is to celebrate our loved one's life. So
Mhm.
often our brain gets stuck on that gets stuck on the endings, gets stuck on the death scene. That's what we focus on rather than their life and all those memories, especially the connection that we shared with them. We forget about that. So I'm curious, how do you personally honor and remember and celebrate your father and your grandmother's life?
Yeah, one of the things with my grandma loved KFC. Like, she just loved Kentucky Fried Chicken, and she had an accent, so Kentucky Fried Chicken. And so for Mother's Day and her birthday, what did she want? Kentucky Fried Chicken with the coleslaw. And so we would always get Kentucky Fried Chicken. And so we would do that on her birthday and on Mother's Day. Like, that was just what we did. And at one point I went vegan. like hardcore vegan, and we eat pretty well, but and when I was in the beginning of my journey, like we were hardcore healthy. And I remember I was like hardcore vegan and I still had to go find a Kentucky Fried Chicken on her. I got so sick, but I was like, but if I don't do it, since then we've stopped and we've adjusted our memory. But that was something, it was just so ritualistic, and it just reminded us of her, and it was necessary. Like I had to do that. With my father, one of the things he used to do is he would send these quirky, corny Valentines to everyone. And I don't do this, but my brother, he still sends, like he looks for the cheesiest Valentines and mails them to everyone in our family. And that was like a trademark of my father. And so he used to do those kinds of things. So I don't do that, but I always wait. And I actually have, so I literally have one of my Valentines like right here. Like it's sitting on my
Oh.
whiteboard. And so I have a stack of these little Valentines that my brother sent me, that my dad sent me. It's a simple thing. One of the things that we chose to do with my father's passing is our family's different. And so I ended up hiring photographers and videographers for the funeral. So he passed away in Toronto, and then we ended up burying him in Edmonton. So we had a prayer service in Toronto, and we hired a videographer to and ask people to share their stories, because my son was really young, my sister's kids were really young, and we have our own preconceived notions of who our father is, but we wanted their stories because he was really influential in his world and in the community and in the academic realm. And so they literally, we hunted people down. We're like, please go share your story. Please share anything. And we captured those stories because we knew this was probably one of the last times that they're going to be around us. And I don't know half these people because they came from different times of his life. And so we captured those stories on video. And we also did that in Edmonton as well with that cohort of his world. And so that was really special. And I think that gave us something, and it gives us something to talk about, and a different way to remember him. We're actually going to go to Edmonton next week, and I'm going to look up those videos. This is perfect timing because the kids are old enough. They're old enough now that they could actually start understanding things. So I'm going to make the kids sit and we'll watch all of the videos of people sharing their stories. And I think it'll be a beautiful way to honor it. So it's talking about it. It's bringing it up. It's inviting it into our lives and creating rituals along with it. But I think if it was something that was meaningful, maybe a cake or types of cookies or something with food. Food's always a good idea. Anything with food is always a great way to remember people, and it brings back those beautiful memories of them.
I absolutely love that. I love the videos. I love that you did that. Like, I'm jealous that we didn't do that at my dad's. Because the reality is we did something for my dad where we met with his AA community and they shared memories and stories about my dad, things that I would have never known or heard about my dad unless we had done that together. But if we had recorded that to be able to go back and reminisce and think, I think that's beautiful. And I love that you're going to share that with your kids, and just that's what it's about, really, and so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and because through all of this, and Kelly and I talk about this a lot, as we're trying to help people progress and move forward. And we don't say moving on, we say moving forward. And as I remind people, whether we like it or not, that's where time is taking us. So we're just trying to keep up. But I think for a lot of people, it's scary to think that they would be moving forward and leaving their loved one behind, which is why those connections, those rituals, any of those things. And, Kelly and I just love hearing people's stories because it's just so unique what everybody does. Um, and to remind people that there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just what makes sense for you, who you are, who your loved one, has always been what your relationship was, and trying to reflect that. So, Larissa, thank you. Because I think, it also kind of, encourages people to be thinking about that stuff, that it can be KFC, it can be simple, it can be stuff that's maybe readily available, and that, it's something that we can attribute to them that they always liked it. So, one thing that we do each week is have sort of an action task for people to kind of take home and put into practice. We've been asking people to start a little bit with like observation, just to be sort of you paying more attention, being mindful of what their routine looks like now, what that structure is, what some of their motivation is or isn't. As we are progressing into this and starting to look into a little bit more of a to do, any ideas? I know one of the things you said today was about kind of starting small, and not making things so big. Any other action task that you could send people home with today, Larissa?
I think keep it simple, but feed your mind, feed your body, stay connected. And this is like critical when you're going through grief, and you might do it at different levels, but this is stuff everyone should be doing anyway.
Mm.
It's not just for grief. We should all be doing this. So
Absolutely.
if you're not doing that, do more of that. But like you need to feed your body so it stays healthy. Because if you don't have a healthy body, you can't function. You're not going to be emotionally level or stable for other people. If you're not feeding your mind, you're going to be having crappy programming from the news and from the gossip and from everywhere and everyone else. Like you got to put earmuffs on that and decide what you want to let in and start putting filters on the world, and then staying connected, not with everyone, but you can be picky, you could be choosy, you could be intentional. Sometimes the types of people you connect with at different points in life are going to be different. You may need to go to different people, but you still need to be around some people in some meaningful way. But I think the biggest thing is stick to these basics no matter what. How you choose to do them and the level at which you do them can vary. Like it's going to change depending on your life circumstance. It's going to change depending on your goals, your intentions, your phase of life, but you've got to keep doing them. We say the basics are the basics are the basics. Life in business, like if you don't do that in life, if you don't do that in business, you're not going to succeed. And it's not about reaching the pinnacle of success. It's about having a good day, because a good day and a series of good days leads to a good week. A series of good weeks leads to a good month. A series of good months leads to a good year. A series of good years leads to a good life. And that's ultimately what we want. We want to look back on our life when we're on our deathbed and go, I did a damn good job. Like I really got a lot out of this life. And God, I truly believe God put us on this earth for a special reason. He's planted seeds of greatness and beautiful gifts inside of us. It is our responsibility to notice them, to nurture them, and to allow them to come forth, because one day we're going to be there. We don't know when that's going to be. And it doesn't matter when it will be, but when we get to that point, can you say like, I did my best, or I at least I did a pretty good job. Like, and I'm satisfied with that. That's what we're after.
If you're looking for a place where you don't have to explain why the days feel different after someone you love has died, we created something for you. The Grief Ladies community is our private, free Facebook group where you can connect with others who get it. It's a space for steady support, real conversations, weekly prompts based on our grief framework, and guided tools you can use at your own pace.
You'll also get early access to workshops, new resources, and behind-the-scene updates from our podcast. If you want a community that's honest, compassionate, and grounded in practical support, come join us. Just search the Grief Ladies community on Facebook. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, it sounds like a shift in our mindset, in our perspective, trying to put some of this into our day and recognizing it's attainable. I think sometimes too, these things feel too far away. But as we said, kind of starting small, piecing it together. I loved what you said about I say like the good hour, the good day. We're trying to build on those blocks to create something that feels like what we can live with. Because, sometimes people, when they've had significant loss or change in their life, feel very much this isn't what I had planned for. This wasn't what I was expecting. So again, we're trying to put some of that choice and that decision back into it again. So thank you for all of that. I think that's some really good places for people to start with all this for sure.
Yeah, this was great, Larissa. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for sharing us your thoughts and all of your insights. And we appreciate you taking the time to do this and to share this. And so if listeners want to know more about you or how to work with you or connect with you, where can they find you?
They can find me at myabundanceacademy.ca. So we'll make sure to give you guys the link. There's also a resource that I put together, and it's not going to be relevant to everyone. I feel like if you're in the early phases, this might not be the most relevant, but it's the personal elevation playbook. Mine is very well used. Printed, very well used. I just found it in this morning. But it's Timeless Truths for Fulfillment, Purpose, and Legacy. And what it is it's a journey for you to go from where you are to your next level of evolution. We are constantly growing, we're constantly evolving. So I feel like if you've gone through some of that early fog phase, like when you're in the fog, it's not going to be as relevant. You're not going to care. But when you're like, okay, the fog is clearing, like, where am I going? It's a beautiful opportunity for you to have some guidance in terms of how to make decisions, in terms of where to go next, to really evaluate your life and what it means so that you can have more of that fulfillment inside. So you can live your life with purpose. So you can start thinking about, like, what legacy are you going to create? I heard the word legacy, but I never really considered it. But when I looked at my father's passing, like, he created a level of legacy through his work. Like, he's been published. He was like a force in his community. And that was really beautiful. I was just like, wow, like, he's kind of an important person. And I just saw him as like this. I saw other aspects of him. I knew he did that, but until he passed, I didn't realize the level of legacy he created in his world. And I thought that was really special because he loved something and he went all in on it, and it influenced so many other people. And so our individual legacies are going to look different, but how are you going to make your mark on the world? They're not going to remember you 10 generations from now, but how many lives do you want to touch in a positive and constructive way? So this just helps you to evaluate that. And it's called the Personal Elevation Playbook. So we'll send you the link for that as well, so you can share that with your audience.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That sounds amazing. I love that. I'm all about legacy. I think that this is part of Karyn and I's legacy, right? Is doing something like this. So thank you. So thank you to our listeners, and make sure you subscribe and share this podcast with others who may benefit. And feel free to reach out with any questions or ideas that you may have. And just know that you're not alone on this grief journey. And we'll be back next week with our next level of our framework, interacting. So stay tuned. Thanks for joining us on The Grief Ladies. Don't wait to feel better to get started. Getting started is what makes you feel better. Put this week's tool to work. If today's episode helped, share it with someone who needs it and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, we're here for you, your trusted grief ladies, navigating this path together.